Welcome in, everyone, to the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News. Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com, joins as well for our midweek podcast. You can get Talkin Tide at Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to get them. We're live on Facebook and YouTube as well. Want to quickly thank our sponsors, Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa and Heat Pizza Bar. More on those fine establishments later in the program. Of course, the Twitter feed is Talkin_Tide. Links to all of our twice weekly podcasts right there on the Twitter feed. So give us a follow there. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. We'll take you through this Alabama season. Travis, we convene here on the midweeker to take a look ahead at this Mississippi State game. It's the first road SEC game of the season for the Crimson Tide. Late kickoff, 8 p.m. it goes. Over in Starkville, live on ESPN. And Travis, I was at Raymond James, okay? It was not noisy in the least. It sounded a little like Dudley Field maybe on the noise meter. But it's going to be different in Starkville. That's a noisy place. And, setting the cowbells aside, right? They got the rule that hushes the cowbells when they need to be hushed.
Supposedly. Yeah.
There's always a few latent rings.
You're not supposed to doctor the baseball either,
Right. That's right. But as it pertains to Alabama's offensive line, Travis, which has been, frankly, the sore spot for this team a month into the season, that's where road noise affects you the most for sure. So it's going to be interesting to see how that group responds, I think, because it's not going to be the same as it was at Raymond James Stadium taking on South Florida from a noise perspective.
Yeah, that I would think was more of almost a neutral site at best situation for the home team in South Florida. This should be much more along the lines of a true road test, although I would anticipate Alabama people being there in pretty large numbers. It's an easy trip. Mississippi State has lost a couple games in a row. It's a late kickoff. So there are some things I think that work in Alabama's favor in all of this when we consider this particular trip and what it could signify for this team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But no doubt, there are still questions to be answered. I think you hit on some of them with the offensive line and also with Jalen Milroe. I mean, we saw him on the road last year at Arkansas respond off the bench, but we're going to see how he can hold up with a start here in the SEC West on the road.
Take a look at these Bulldogs really quick, Travis, starting with the offense. Will Rogers back at quarterback, not having the year he's used to having under the late Mike Leach. This is a much more balanced offense. As a matter of fact, it's a little run heavy, has been for the most part, under Zach Arnett. And so it's an offense that struggles a lot. Rodgers has struggled a lot. Bounced back last week for sure. Kind of looked like his old self. But, there have been a couple games where they've only thrown 18, 20 balls, I think, Travis. And so that's part of it. This is a Mississippi State offense that's still trying to find itself.
Yeah, last week was like, what was that? Because they did throw it 48 times at South Carolina. You're right. Prior to that, it was a little Stallings ballish with what they were asking Will Rogers to do. But Tulu Griffin went off last week for 256 receiving yards, working primarily from the slot. So that perks up your ears a little bit when you see that type of performance. And, I think that State has some solid guys on the outside, but as much as anything, I think there's a couple of guys you have to account for. It starts with Woody Marks at the running back position. He's off to a nice start to the season and making that switch from the air raid to something more along the lines of what you see from pro-style offenses in 2023. And then again, with what Griffin can do, working inside and working against perhaps Malachi Moore a good bit coming up this weekend.
Yeah, that should be an interesting matchup. Will Rogers hadn't had a ton of luck against Alabama. Mississippi State on the whole has dropped 15 straight to the Crimson Tide. Travis took care of business back in 2007. Kind of caught Nick Saban the year you needed to catch him And then from 2008 on, it's been all Alabama in that series, including 7 in a row in Starkville. So that's what you're looking at on offense. Defensively for Mississippi State, Travis, Nathaniel Watson, the linebacker, who got a lot of preseason hype. He's lived up to it. He's a heck of a player. Jet Johnson having it's a strong group of linebackers for sure. Secondary has been a sore spot at Mississippi State, especially these last couple weeks. Got lit up by Jaden Daniels of LSU, got lit up by Spencer Rattler right on the heels of that. So pass defense an issue, but up front, Nick Saban seems to think that the physicality and the scheme in terms of the aggressiveness with this front seven from Mississippi State could present some problems. Again, going back to an offensive line that's had its issues.
Yeah, I don't think Alabama, maybe it will. Maybe it'll just come right out and two tights and run the football for 4 straight quarters on this Mississippi State defense. And, I know Mississippi State is, statistically anyway, in run defense, not exactly at the top of the league standings, but I think they give up around 3.5 yards per carry, which is, that's not terrible, so they've been solid as you would expect because of primarily the guys that you outlined. I think Johnson and, the inside linebacker situation there is kind of reminiscent to me of what we see a lot of years from Arkansas. I mean, you got a couple of guys that are probably going to have 100+ tackles for State in that defense, but, you're right. The secondary's just it's been a dumpster fire without being able to put it any better than that. And I think part of that too is when I look at the State defense, yes, I like the interior people, but as far as edge pressure, having a Dallas Turner type of guy, having a Chris Braswell type, I don't really see that with this defense at State, and that's kind of made the situation on the back end even more problematic.
I think a big step, Travis, for this offensive line of Alabama going against this defense is to see if they can start getting more movement up front because we're seeing a lot of zone blocking from this Alabama offensive line, a lot of the combo blocks. And it's not all, some of these zone concept combo blocks, you got a guy who's really just chipping and then moving on to a linebacker, but not all of them. Some of them are straight up double teams where you're trying to guarantee movement up front. You're trying to create a gash and a hard time maybe for a linebacker behind to scrape and make a play. And we're not seeing that, frankly, a lot with this Alabama offensive line yet. And I think if this line is going to grow and develop, it's going to be a good test to see if they can get some push up front and kind of create that new line of scrimmage that Coach Fulford's looking for.
Yeah, the duo run play, as it's called, was a favorite of Tommy Rees's at Notre Dame, and it essentially consists of double teams early, and then you do try to get up to the second level. It's a concept that's used across football. It's nothing overly innovative, but the idea is to get the back eventually in a situation where he is making his decision off of the opposing Mike or inside linebacker. And that kind of puts that guy in a tough spot against a running back with either side of the field to work with. And, we've seen flashes of this run game doing what most anticipated it to do on a consistent basis, especially in the second half of the last 2 games. So you said it. Can Alabama come out early and establish that momentum on the ground, and including Jalen Milroe as a part of that? I think, it's still asking a lot of Jalen, especially going on the road, to sit in the pocket and deliver on a consistent basis. They've got to be able to run the football consistently, especially these next couple of weeks on the road.
Definitely seems like the book on Milroe so far is not the blitz, right? You rush 3, you rush 4, you might get home with Alabama's struggles up front. You spy Milroe with a linebacker, a safety, what have you, and then you just take a whatever numbers advantage you can in the back end because if you're only rushing 3, you're going to have that advantage. And so that's kind of, to me, that's kind of what Milroe is going to have to break through. And And it's not easy because even if you get a lot of time to throw, which with a 3-man rush, you should certainly, it can be treacherous back there when there's 7, 8 in coverage.
This would seem to be a good spot for RPO because you got to think State's going to be amped up on slowing down the run game, especially with the backs and Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams. And that action could help open some windows maybe in the RPO game. But haven't really seen all that much of it really with Jalen Milroe so far in his start. So, I think Jalen is, again, designed runs. I'll be interested to see if there's continued expansion in terms of variety that they go with some of that. But I have no question that from the outset of Saturday night's game, as you sort of alluded to, it's an interesting sort of chess match between these staffs because Zach Arnett, I think at his core, he wants to bring people, even if it does mean he leaves a very, very, very vulnerable secondary exposed, which they have done. They did it just this last week at South Carolina. And, quarterbacks like Spencer Rattler, you give them that look enough, they hit that crosser. And a guy like Leggett for South Carolina catches a 4-yard crossing route and it turns into a 75, 80-yard touchdown. Those are the things that, if I were Zach Arnett, based on the tape that he's seen and his staff has seen, I'd probably be a little more selective in when I brought pressure this week.
Deontay Lawson in the news today as well. The Alabama linebacker not available for practice on Wednesday per Nick Saban. Travis makes him Saban's words, not mine. I think he's called him very questionable. Terrence Ferguson as well along that offensive line. Be a big blow for Alabama not to have Lawson in there. He's a call maker for that front. But beyond that, he's looked good, Travis. I think he's had a solid season. Certainly looks to me like a better overall player than he was a year ago for Alabama. And he's a key peg in there because they don't quite have things all figured out at inside linebacker with him, much less without him.
Yeah, I think confidence was the biggest thing you were seeing from Deontay in comparison to a year ago when it seemed like when he got on the field early in games, it took him a little bit to kind of get his legs under him. Really, from the start of his starts so far this season, he was showing up in a confident manner. So, yeah, that's problematic potentially, but this is also why you went to the transfer portal to bring in a guy like Trez Marshall. If you have to, you can lean on him to run the show from one of those inside linebacker positions. I think Jihad Campbell is probably at a point where he can do more of that too. Kendrick Blackshire should be, and Kendrick's in his third year in the program. So They have capable options and, more importantly, guys that they have integrated into the defense during competitive times of games to this point. It hasn't just been mop-up duty for these guys. They've been out there. It's been platoon-like in a lot of ways. So Deontay obviously is their guy. But the situation really has played out okay, I'd say, given how much they've been able to work the others.
It's been a really solid defensive performance from Alabama, really for 2 weeks in a row when you put the South Florida game and the Ole Miss game together. It's been excellent since giving up 34 to Texas. If they're able to carry that over on the road without Lawson, be a good sign for this defense overall to have a guy who's right in the middle of it. More than likely, it sounds like, be absent or at least be very limited. If they can get the job done with kind of a hole in the middle there, hard to argue with the notion that this defense is coming along pretty quickly.
Yeah, it kind of just stinks for Robert Bala, the inside linebackers coach, and Kevin Steele, really, that you were getting Jihad Campbell back to whole. He had the injury early in the season, in the preseason. Last week, he looked as good as we've probably seen him to this point. And then you lose Deontay Lawson. So you'd like to see that group fully together at full strength at some point. But yeah, that's the concern too, big picture wise. That kind of injury that Deontay has had, and the way he plays, he can go sideline to sideline. He very good in coverage. Does this become, this point moving forward throughout the remainder of the season situation for him? You hope not. But again, it seems to be that kind of injury.
Let's turn to Alabama special teams for just a couple minutes before we move on in the program. Kind of overlooked, I think, the last couple of weeks, Travis, because Alabama has won by 14 in each of the last 2 weeks. Typically, special teams just tends to get a lot more attention in close games, right? Last couple of weeks, Alabama has been able to pull away by 2 scores, but James Burnip and Will Reichard, I don't think Nick Saban would trade that pair for any pair right now. Burnip's bombing them from a punting standpoint, doing a really nice job. Reichard, as we know, has been money from a field goal perspective. Did kick a couple of kickoffs out of bounds last week against Ole Miss. That was something that rankled Nick Saban, always does when that happens. But overall, those two have been outstanding. And then you throw in something like a block punt from Ja'Cory Brooks, and Alabama special teams has been more than solid of late.
It has, and you kind of wonder, when are we going to see Alabama return to more of the non-offensive touchdowns that this program was so well known for it seemed like a decade or so. And they've had opportunities, and if they do what they've done with situations like Ja'Cory Brooks blocking that punt, sooner or later, you're going to get back into that column more frequently than we've seen of late. So the defense can provide some of that as well. So, that's where you could see an uptick maybe as soon as this week. I think both teams are going to feel like the return game is an area this week where they can make up some ground, because Tulu Griffin, if he gets some opportunities on kickoffs, he's definitely got the potential from that standpoint. And then Kool-Aid McKinstry on punt returns. But as far as specialists go, absolutely. James Burnett, Will Reichard, Neil Hibbett, those guys have been pretty much lights out. And to the extent where, even when Alabama loses 22 yards on a possession that starts at the other team's 1 yard line, you can run Will Reichard out there from 40 in that situation, and he's pretty much going to drill it, which is what he continues to do.
Salvage 3 points on a disaster of a drive right there, no doubt about it. All right, let's check in really quick with the Ticket Man and the Vegas Man, as we do on the midweeker each week. Cheap ducats for this one, Travis, in Starkville. Tickets wise, $30-$40 online right now. Obviously, it'll be cheaper than that around the stadium on game day. But you can get in cheap for sure in the upper decks, and even the premium seats. Took a quick look at those a little bit earlier today. Down in the lower bowl between the 40s, about $100 will get you home, and even less in some places. And so, not a bad way to spend a day, price and value wise, for anybody who wants to grab some seats for Davis Wade. Make a relatively short drive over to Starkville, only about 90 minutes over there from Tuscaloosa. Obviously, we got listeners all over the state. From most places, it'd be a little longer than that to get to Starkville, but pretty inexpensive ticket right now.
Yeah, and that's on Wednesday, right? So come Saturday, you ought to be able to do really well for yourself in the premium seating areas. And that's a late kickoff, man. And again, the home team has lost a couple games in a row. It is the imperfect storm for the local ticket man. He doesn't appreciate that at all, because in the preseason he's looking at that schedule and he's got that Alabama, he got that big like triple circle around Alabama. He doesn't just circle Alabama once, it's like triple circled. And no, not working out so well for him.
Couple of losses offends the constituency, Travis.
Yes. Maybe Pappy O'Daniel will still show up,
Love to see him there. No doubt about it. All right, the
Vegas the
man.
flash.
We ain't one at a time in here.
Yeah, man, asking me in a kite?
Alabama by 14.5 is the betting spread. Travis, Vegas man's got Alabama, pretty heavy favorite on the road. I think it's understandable given the way Mississippi State has played of late. The over-under a little on the low side at 46.5. Also to be expected, I would say. But your thoughts on the spread and or the total at 46.5?
I'm stay away Jay when it comes to Bama spreads with this team so far this season, and I would probably prescribe the same approach for this week. I don't know about you.
I'm runaway Chase. Get away from that thing. Yeah, I don't like it either.
My name's Paul, and that's between y'all.
I do like one, however, around the league. The time is going to come, Travis, when I'm not going to want to draw any attention at all to this weekly pick of mine. But while it's hot, I'm bringing it up. Called that over in the LSU Arkansas game last year. Got home in the second half. Looked bad at halftime. That number was 54.5, and they barely scored at all first half, and then they turned it on. Ended up scoring 65 total in that one, so that one came home pretty easily. I like Tennessee, South Carolina going under 64. Travis, this weekend, I'm not quite so sure why that number's so high, but it struck me. And Kentucky -1 at home against Florida looked good to me.
How many is South Carolina getting on the road in Knoxville? Because I might like South Carolina in the points.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember the number. I'm pretty sure it's double digits. So
Tennessee is struggling to score right now, and I think South Carolina is still going to score some points. And I'm not saying to the extent that they'll go over the total that you told us about there at 64 or whatever.
It's a big number.
But I can see South Carolina signing up for the full 60 minutes at Neyland Stadium, especially after that win over the Vols in Cola last season. I know there's all this revenge talk and this. Tennessee right now doesn't strike me as a team that is, playing to that sort of standard where you're expecting them to just roll South Carolina in large part because of the events of last November.
Right. Absolutely. All right. We are going to move on really quickly and thank a couple sponsors here on the Talkin Tide podcast. We're going to start out by telling you a little bit about Heat Pizza Bar. Hey, if you're looking for a fun place and a great atmosphere to enjoy some fantastic pizza in Tuscaloosa, can't pick a better spot than Heat Pizza Bar, located downtown in Government Square, ranked one of the top pizzerias in all of Alabama. Flat screen TVs all over the place for you sports fans. Super sides, signature pizzas, great salads as well. They got some jalapeno poppers over there that you can't beat. Get over there. They've got a Wednesday special, that fantastic chicken bacon ranch pizza that Frank Fleming's staff will serve up for just $9 from 2 to 6 p.m. And you absolutely cannot beat that. Parking always easy with that Tuscaloosa public parking garage right behind Heat Pizza Bar. Go check them out, 2250 6th Street, downtown Tuscaloosa in Government Square Plaza.
Going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa, right there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. 16 years in business right there at that very same location. You know all about Peterbrook Chocolatier at this point, but here's a reminder. How about some of that signature chocolate covered popcorn? And of course, football season means those real sized chocolate footballs that are available to you right now at Peterbrook Chocolatier. You got Halloween coming up. Every game day weekend, you need to check them out. Go by that center carousel area right there as you walk into the store. And if you like the bin items, say you like dark chocolate almonds, you like espresso beans covered in chocolate, you like malt balls covered in chocolate, you can make yourself just sort of this beautiful little bag of different treats and you'll be set. Do it today. Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa.
All right, the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. Moving on, check us out on Twitter as well at Talkin_Tide, YouTube and Facebook as well. Travis will bounce around the Southeastern Conference, really quick, no non-conference games in the entire league this week. I want to say this is the first week where it's nothing but SEC versus SEC. Florida be at Kentucky, A&M at Arkansas, Georgia at Auburn, Missouri at Vanderbilt, LSU at Ole Miss. The aforementioned South Carolina Gamecocks traveling to Knoxville to take on Tennessee, and of course Alabama at Mississippi State. Travis, LSU Ole Miss, one I'm going to have my eye on. Ole Miss still ranked at number 20 in the country. LSU comes in as the visiting team, ranked 13th in the nation. And this is the game, if you remember, Travis, that ran Ole Miss's season kind of off the rails last year. You remember Ole Miss got out to like a 7-0 start last year, and then LSU came in there and just rained on it. That game was actually in Baton Rouge, of course, but this one in Oxford, it's going to be interesting to see how Lane Kiffin's squad bounces back from a disappointing loss to Alabama to turn around and now have to host those Tigers.
Yeah, they do. And look, they've got to achieve some semblance of balance in this game. They've got to get Quinshon Judkins going in the run game, because if they don't and they expose Jackson Dart to more of the sort of second half beating that he took in Tuscaloosa, I just don't know about the shelf life for Dart. And I respect the guy. I love his toughness, love the way he plays. But you're going from Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell last week to Harold Perkins in that LSU pass rush this week. So sustainability at the quarterback position. And look, we know Ole Miss has once again worked the transfer portal in the most recent offseason. So there's depth there, but you just don't want to see it unless it just can't be avoided. And I think some of it can be, and hopefully Jackson Dart's able to get through this one in one piece.
Florida at Kentucky, Travis, the last Kentucky coach to beat Florida 3 years in a row, none other than Paul W. Bear Bryant. That was 1949, 50, and 51. Mark Stoops has got 2 in a row on those Gators, got a chance to make it 3 in a row and join the Bear with a home victory over the Gators. I think they got the better quarterback in Devin Leary. They got that home field advantage. They're favored, I think, by just 1 point. So out in Vegas, they certainly expect it to be a tight game, and so do I. But I think I like UK in this one to get over the hump again.
Yeah, and a series that for so long was just absolutely dominated by Florida. But one of the accomplishments that Stoops has achieved in Lexington is, this type of series. And it's why he is entrenched, I think, for as long as he probably wants to be the coach at Kentucky. He is absolutely the guy. I think that Mertz has played better than some people expected him to play for Florida at the quarterback position. I think for Florida, it's going to be about the 2 running backs, especially Etienne coming off the game he had against Tennessee a couple weeks ago. Can Kentucky support Leary enough with some run game and that offensive line that was certainly beleaguered a year ago? That's what I think that game comes down to.
Bad news out of College Station. Connor Weigman, the outstanding quarterback for Texas A&M, looks like he's out for the season. They're going to be turning to Max Johnson, presumably for the balance of the year, and beginning with a road test at Arkansas. That injury to Weigman, I think, Travis, especially considering that's at Arkansas, that makes that game a lot more of a toss-up to me.
Yeah, the SEC, it seems like, is almost becoming like the NFL. You better have quarterback depth, right? Because Weigman goes out, but it's a good situation for Texas A&M with Max Johnson, certainly a veteran of SEC wars. Talked about Jackson Dart earlier. Spencer Sanders comes in from Oklahoma State, so that's a good situation if it needs to be play out that way for Lane Kiffin. But there are still teams you worry about, like Arkansas with KJ Jefferson. Even Jaden Daniels at LSU, Nussmeier, his backup, appears to be very capable. So, man, it's early in the season. We're already talking about contingency plans at quarterback for some of these SEC teams. I still like Texas A&M, I think, over Arkansas, that game at Jerry World in Arlington, because they still play that neutral site deal.
That's right.
With those two. But I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, I saw at Arkansas somewhere. They must just be the designated home team for that one or
Yeah,
something.
kind of like Florida, Georgia, and
Right.
how that switches. But I wonder too about Arkansas. They used a lot in Baton Rouge last Saturday night, and it was a courageous performance. KJ Jefferson, I thought, was tremendous. But what do they still have in the tank as they now go see Texas A&M in Arlington?
All right, you mentioned quarterback depth, Travis. Speaking of depth, let's take a dive in that two-deep tumbler really quickly before we get out of here. The tumbler skipped a week last week, of course, as you know. And
didn't make the travel squad. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. We're on the road.
Third string snapper doesn't travel.
Didn't have an extra one fall out this time for a change. All right, number 32 comes out of the two-deep tumbler. And that's the aforementioned. They did it again, Travis. Deontay Lawson. This tumbler is unbelievable. Whoever we're talking about,
the timely
out
tumbler.
That jersey number.
It'll be sponsored by Timex. It's so timely.
Just for verification, you can see that 3-2 right there.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. At any rate, Deontay Lawson, a big key for this linebacker core. There's no doubt about it. The season he's having. This is an injury that Nick Saban's staff, and for Lawson for sure, you don't want it to linger. You don't want it to be something that hampers him or puts him in a situation where he comes back but maybe needs a month to get back to himself, which happens sometimes with guys that come back from injuries where they're dealing with pain, but maybe the injury is for the most part healed. So really, as quickly as Alabama can get a 100% Deontay Lawson back on the field, they need it.
They do. I think Campbell getting back to full health is huge because he has every down attributes, especially when you talk about getting into some third down situations. I don't think Alabama will be in dime all that much Saturday night. I think they'll play a good bit of nickel. But when they go dime, if they go dime, that'll be something that you'll want to keep an eye on. Who is the Mac in the dime? Who is the lone inside linebacker that stays out there? Is it Jihad? Is it Tresman Marshall? We've seen Kendrick Blackshire again play in some nickel and some situations in pass rush opportunities that Alabama's had. So, that's where I think it'll show up the most. Is more so in those sub packages and when it comes down to playing in coverage and just sideline to sideline ability.
It's going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. For Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News. Be sure to join us this coming weekend. On Sunday, we will be recapping Alabama's road game at Mississippi State. Until then, so long from Talkin Tide.